My name is Emma, and I'm doing a book review on the book 1776. This is a book by David McCullough. This is what the book looks like. This book was published on May 24, 2005 by Simon & Schuster. And this book is seen as a companion book to David McCullough's autobiography on John Adams. But for this activity, I focused on the book 1776, and I read the entire book cover to cover, every word on every page. The book 1776 is a historical book that focuses on the events leading up to the American Revolutionary War. 1776 was a pivotal year for our country, and it laid a foundation for who we are as Americans today. A major focus in the book was the Continental Army and George Washington and his leadership. This book is told through the soldier perspective to give a more accurate representation or description of this time period. There are three major divisions in the book. They are the Siege, Fateful Summer, and the Long Retreat. Each section contains 2 to 3 chapters, and they help lay the timeline of these events leading up to the American Revolutionary War. The book does begin in 1775 with King George and Parliament and the discussion of military forces. In the siege section, we quickly transition to the siege of the British occupied Boston. We also talk about the Americans sieging the Dorchester Heights. And then we switch to the Fateful Summer, and we're taking place in New York. And this deals with the line being drawn, the battlefield being acted upon. There also is the dissolve in the connection between the American and Great Britain. And there also is the section ending at York Island, which is also known as Manhattan Island. As we transition to the last section, the Long Retreat, this deals with the Americans and their facing of disease, defeat, discretion, and it kind of wraps the entire timeline up and describes how we got to the war and the results of the war. I don't want to tell you the ending because that would ruin it. So if you really want to know, 1776 by David McCullough lays a timeline for the American Revolutionary War with great detail. Now, the book 1776 is a book that, in my opinion, could be very challenging for individuals to read. I remember when I was in 11th grade, we were assigned this book to read in my English Lit class. When I first saw the book, I honestly said I will not be reading that because I was not a fan of reading books that were history-based. One, because I felt like it was too much information in one book. So I quickly turned my head to this book, did not pay it much attention, barely got by on the assignments, and didn't do well on my test. So as I graduated high school and went into college, I began very interested in history. And when I saw this book on the book list, I said, I'm going to give that book another try. So when I read this book, I was amazed at how much information was in the book on the American Revolutionary War and the events leading up to it. I would recommend this book to anybody. Now, this is a thicker book, but I will tell you this book is very informational. This book can be a challenging read because it has a lot of information, facts, date, people, places. It's very jam-packed with information. This would be a book that someone who loves history would love to dive into. If you're not very much into history, it could be a very challenging read like it was for me in high school, but I think it would be very eye-opening. I know it was for me. Before reading this book, I kind of just had American Revolution in my mind, but reading it, I feel very eye-opened to the people and the places and the things that occurred. Now, when I began to think about lesson topics for this book, I quickly realized that 1776 is over the heads of anybody K through 6. Now, high school, it could fit into the upper grades, maybe 10 through 12, but for anybody K through 6 especially, this would be very over their heads. But I began to think about a concept in the book that I could bring into an elementary lesson. And the thing that came to my mind when I started looking through the standards, finding ways I could connect this book to an elementary lesson, is the American Revolutionary War. There's a 5th grade standard. There's actually 2, the 7th and 8th standard, that deal with the American Revolutionary War. One standard deals in particular with the leading up to the American Revolutionary War, and the other standard deals with the major events of the war, such as sub-battles, things such as that. For this particular idea, I thought about using the events that led up to the American Revolutionary War, and maybe even into the war. So, for the lesson, I would begin by sparking students' interest in the American Revolutionary War, because when this is a 5th grader that probably doesn't have much, if any, knowledge on what the American Revolutionary War is, so what occurs in this lesson will be laying the foundation that they have for this war. So I would begin by asking students the question, what do you know about the American Revolutionary War? I would ask students to record their response in their social studies journal and to prepare a time to share with us if they would like to. We would take time to discuss as a class what our views were on the American Revolutionary War. We would record some of our answers, and then we would transition into a virtual field trip on the American Revolutionary War, or we could do an interactive YouTube video. Both of these would be used to present information to the students on this war, and they would also open their eyes to new things that they didn't know about the war. There are also a variety of passages and things that could be read by the students, and there also is variety of videos and resources available. For activities for this, I would include the interactive group discussion. I would then allow students to be either YouTube video or the interactive field trip. After this, we would split up into groups of 4. Each group would be given a large post-it note. In the middle would be American Revolutionary War. Students would also be given a stack of sticky notes. Each student can record as many facts as they want to about the American Revolutionary War, and they can stick it on their large post-it note to be displayed in front of the class. This will allow students to express their ideas that they have discovered about the American Revolutionary War while also connecting with their peers on the topic. After a time period has passed, we will gather back to a whole group discussion, and we will dissect each group's discoveries and talk about and build that foundation on the American Revolutionary War. After this is finished, I will wrap it up and ask students to each return to their desk. I will complete an exit slip with the students to get a good assessment of how well they understood the material. So students will be asked to provide me 3 solid facts that they learned from today's lesson. I will use that to determine if students have a beginning foundation for the American Revolutionary War. Now, the American Revolutionary War is not a topic that students would learn in this one lesson. It would take multiple times of being introduced to it. There's tons of things connected to the American Revolutionary War, and that this could continue on and will continue on throughout their high school as they continue to advance in their history learning. This book review really opened my eyes to how informational books can be, whether it be social studies related or not. This book opened my eyes to the year 1776 and how it affected us as a country.